It's 5 o'clock, 5:01 actually. Mark, are you ready? Can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Michelle Bond.
Here.
Robert Burke.
Present.
Ray Fay is present. Luke Fassard said he would be joining us. He has a parent-teacher conference at 5, but he's joining us after that is done.
Okay.
John Halleck is present, and David Lorman, I believe, is present as well. Yep,
yes, present.
So we have six present.
I'm here also, Mark.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin Munson. Sorry, I was looking at the minutes from last time, and I'm sorry I missed you, Kevin.
Yeah, I wasn't there. Thanks, no problem.
Yep.
So with that, we have a quorum. Let's call the meeting to order at 5:01. And Mark, let's go ahead and start with the proof of posting.
Yes, posted at the front bulletin board, out at the airport, on our website, distributed via our listserv. So we covered the bases.
All right, thank you very much. The next item up is public comment. So I want to make a couple of comments before we get to the comment. So everybody gets 3 minutes. We would ask you to respect the 3 minutes. We'll let you know when you hit your 3 minutes, and we'll be as courteous as possible, but eventually if you keep talking, we'll shut you off. You cannot give your 3 minutes to anybody else. And it would be very nice if people could be keep to the facts and be as respectful of each other as possible. And with that, Mark, let's begin the public comment.
All right, Jenny P. is first.
Jenny?
I apologize. There's dogs.
Oh. Jenny, go ahead. There was a glitch. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Okay. I have 3 things. One is regarding the hangar space. I request a legitimate, transparent process for determining the current demand for more hangar space. No private businesses should be allowed to manipulate the data as they did for Survey 1, which falsely reported a need to expand the airport and was later thrown out when exposed. And it became apparent at the AMPAC meeting last week that a private multi-million-dollar business could be looking to expand on the back of the taxpayers, with the city of Middleton acquiring land by eminent domain and financing the construction of hangars, or getting FAA money to do that, which is taxpayer money. And the neighbors don't want that kind of expansion and don't want to pay for it, so a private business can profit, especially a private business that disrupts the neighborhood. So I would just ask that showing the need for hangar space be a legitimate process that doesn't have to be questioned. Regarding the proposed abbreviated airport approval process, Capital Flight should have to go through the same City of Middleton special event approval processes as everyone else. They should have to completely fill out the same forms as everyone else, including the parts that consider their effects on the neighbors, which they've already gotten away with neglecting. They should not be given preferential treatment, especially since they've shown complete disregard for the neighbors in the past. Fly-in events with 600 anticipated attendees are very disruptive to the residential areas surrounding the airport, and fly in the face of the City of Middleton's stated zero carbon, green, and environmental justice initiatives. So I'd like to see Capital Flight hold charitable events, which I think are appreciated by the community, but have them not be disruptive to the neighbors and the environment, and that should be considered in any approval process that they need to go through. And the third thing, I don't know who should be muting themselves, but there's a lot of background noise there. I request that the Airport Commission budget $80,000 for an unleaded fuel storage tank and include that in the airport master planning process. I'm not sure if that's most appropriate for the AC or for the AMPAC. But even if there's no FAA funding now, there may be in the future. And surely this cost is a drop in the bucket compared to the runway improvements and additions or land acquisition or hangar construction that are being considered. Reportedly, a hangar owner at Sauk Prairie installed an $80,000 UL-94 fuel tank there in 2017, and now half the pilots there are using unleaded fuel. So this doesn't have to be so far out in the future, and we could do it here. And maybe Capital Flight or another hangar owner here would even consider being a good neighbor donating an unleaded fuel tank here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Appreciate your comments. Mark?
We have a guest with a hand up.
Thank you, Mark. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Cynthia Richardson. Good evening, everyone. My comments are about action item number 4. I am concerned as to why you are even contemplating reducing public transparency and disclosure for Capital Flight special events. In fact, the City Council should be responsible for the approval of any Maury Airport event, regardless of the size or sponsor. A major reason is the lead and other pollutants these fly-in events spread over the entire geographic area surrounding Maury Airport. The DNR has calculated that operations at Maury Airport are responsible for approximately 32% of all mobile air lead emissions in Dade County. It is well documented in medical studies and literature that lead is an extremely dangerous substance in the human body, especially in children. According to the CDC and the EPA, there is no safe level of lead in humans. Even low levels of lead exposure can cause adverse health impacts. Almost every aircraft that comes into or leaves Maury Airport leaves some lead particles in the air to be inhaled by city and town residents. If such particles are not inhaled, they settle in the soil or water for possible later human exposure. Lead does not deteriorate, it only accumulates over time. 81% of the City of Middleton residents stated very clearly in a recent referendum they wanted the City Council to pursue policies protective of the environment. Large-scale events at Maury Airport that involve fly-in aircraft are completely contrary to anything protective of the environment and the health, safety, and welfare of the people who live here. The City Council should be required to pass on every proposed event at the airport and make an independent determination as to whether or not the environmental damage and public health implications such event will surely cause is offset by a definable, positive aspect that makes it worth ignoring the environmental directive of 81% of the city's residents. Furthermore, any such decision should be completely public and transparent with full disclosure, discussion, and public input. I urge you not to create any special exemption for Capital Flight or any other business with respect to events of any kind at Maury Airport. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Mark?
I see 4 other hands up, and originally, I think the sequence has changed on my screen, so I'm just gonna go with what I see across the top. I see Robert, then I see Joe, then I see Eric, then I see Jade. So we'll go in that order. So Robert?
I'm on the phone too.
Okay, thank you. I'm a Middleton resident for quite a few years, almost 30 years. I do not share the perspective of some of the callers that aviation is a bad thing, but I do think it's important to reduce the carbon footprint of aviation and to reduce the lead footprint of aviation. And I'm wondering if Maury Airport could adopt a lead-free fuel option for local aircraft. That would be wonderful. I also wonder if Maury Airport could use short-range battery powered aircraft as trainers, as apparently is being done in some places now. And whether Maury Airport has plans to install level 2 charging facilities for electric aircraft at Maury Airport. Also, does it plan to consider renewable fuel for piston engines or jet engines? And in general, what plans does the airport have to reduce its carbon footprint along with the rest of the city of Middleton? Those are my questions, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it very much. Mark?
Robert, are you a city or town of Middleton resident? You said Middleton.
I'm a city resident.
Great, thank you. Joe is next.
Joe, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak, first of all. and my name is Joe Getty, and I am a resident of Middleton Township. I live in the 70% of the area that the Middleton Airport is using as part of its operating area. As a resident, I clearly do not look forward to a summer of good weather and enjoyment around my home. It is already constantly filled with an overabundance of aircraft noise from the airport. We have continually complained about it in all forms available to us. But the issue appears to fall on deaf ears from both the airport and the city of Middleton. Noise is a big issue. It was addressed by Mead and Hunt in the report, as I found out in the last meeting by the Airport Commission. At least the noise portion was a cut and paste job used to show the noise level experienced in the aircraft was not disproportionate enough from the surrounding area to make a difference. The issue is that Mead and Hunt left out the lower portion of the chart that would have been representative of the environment of the townships of Middleton and Springfield. And that's really important to consider. It makes a big difference. Does the overall airport plan have a solution to this? Yes, they do. They want to build more hangars for more planes so the flight volumes will go up. It is my understanding that the city of Middleton has already agreed to let Capital Air hold a Rock the Ramp this summer with at least an additional 100 individual planes flying in and out of the airport over the weekend. With that approved, Capital Air is longing to have an additional monthly an additional monthly concert series at the airport. I don't know how many that will attract, but with a live band going until midnight and beer and wine and alcohol served by their Class B bar, I'm sure it will be highly advertised, and I'm sure many will come. Many thanks to the city of Middleton, Capital Air, and Maury Field for the willingness to consider the feelings of their neighbors. In addition to the noise, there's a problem with air pollution. It was recognized by the airport committee that the FAA is not big on air pollution issues. The Environmental Protection Agency and the
30
Transportation...
seconds. Joe, 30 seconds, just a warning,
Okay.
just to let you know.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, I lost my place.
Sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted. I just wanted to give you a warning.
The
Sorry
air
about that.
pollution issue. The Environmental Protection Agency and the Transportation Research Board, however, are concerned. Their findings are significant. Over 70% of the lead emissions to air come from aircraft. Among aviation emissions are unique. Their emission particles are much smaller, allowing them to easily spread by air movements or absorbed by lungs, skin, plants, animals, and the earth around us. These are significant, and I figure that my wife and I have about 10 years left in this area due to our age. Why is all this so important to me? My friends, my neighbors, their children all live here. Lead concentrations may not bother me, but it will bother them. My concern is for the future. Shouldn't that be everyone's concern? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. Mark, next.
Eric Engen is next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. I agree with what Joe is saying. And the noise is my biggest issue. I live in the town of Middleton, just under Maury's training pattern. And I want to encourage everyone on the commission and members of here that are with AMPAC as well. We've been dealing with noise for, you guys deal with it, we live it. The hotline, the reporting issues, none of that, the abatement area, which is completely meaningless because the training flights go right through there, as do the jets. None of that does anything to address the real issue here. The one thing I see that could address the real issue is modifying this training pattern. And that's something that came up in the last meeting. And I just think that if you guys want to address this issue, in a meaningful way, you would look at this and see that there's got to be a way to modify the trading pattern, take it out and away from more and more houses. To the north, we have mostly farmland. Farms are businesses that have their own noise. There'd be a much lesser impact by shifting the pattern to the north by making this a right turn airport. I think it's offensive to me when you have a pattern now that from the quote unquote good neighbor airport, when you go into the wind to the east, which doesn't happen all that often, but does happen as it did today, that the planes are able to turn left immediately before they get to the city of Middleton and create noise pollution for the city of Middleton. Whereas when you head out to the west, which is the most of the time, they can't turn until they reach Prairie Home Estate subdivision, much further out. That is ridiculous. And I just want you to take a step back, look at all this noise issues you've been dealing with forever, particularly in the last couple of years, and say, let's do something that really addresses this. And that is the one that I think makes the most sense. Couple that reduction in noise, that's less lead in the air that my children are consuming living under the Maury training flights. Please look at this open-minded and make a good faith effort to make those changes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mark?
And then Jade has her hand up.
Yep, thanks, Mark. I just wanted to respond to a couple comments that have been made just to provide points of clarity. The first one is in regard to Jenny's comment on federal funding for private aircraft hangars. And just for everybody's reference, the federal government does not provide any funds for private hangar building. So that's an inaccurate statement. I just want to clarify. Second of all, with regard to unleaded fuel, I agree that's an excellent option and would love to see that option being made available at Middleton Airport. That being said, there are many airplanes that are not currently approved to use unleaded fuel, and that includes Cirrus aircraft. They are not certified to use anything but 100 low lead at this time. And then lastly, in response to Joe's comments on a monthly concert series, I'm not quite sure where that came from, but that's 100% inaccurate. We've never stated we want a monthly concert series to take place.
Excuse me, isn't this a public comment time?
I am public and I'm commenting.
Excuse me, isn't this a public comment time?
It is. Jade Hofelt has the floor to speak right now.
Okay, I am waiting to speak from public comment.
Okay.
And we can get to you after this current speaker is finished with her comments.
And that's all I had. I just wanted to clarify the monthly concert series. I'm not really sure where that came from, but it's 100% inaccurate. So thank you.
Okay, Jay, thank you for your comments. Mark?
The person who just spoke can speak now. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. This is Kathy Wolf, Hickory Trail, Middleton. I'm not sure who spoke before Jade, but I would reiterate some of the same concerns about the level of plane traffic over our neighborhood is unbelievable. It's some days it's just constant all day long, and we really need to pursue the noise abatement plan that the individual was talking about, having more flights going towards the north, and why there's this continued concentration in this direction after there have been so many comments about this is just sort of confusing to me. But so the noise issue, the lead issue continues to be a concern, particularly with so many flights coming over our neighborhood. And then I wanted to also comment on what I'm not sure if anyone else has spoken to this yet, but the issue of these special events at the airport and the liquor license, which apparently is getting some kind of special waiver so that there isn't the customary city approval process. And particularly with a liquor license, there needs to be a very comprehensive background check. Many factors need to be considered. And so a waiver by a small group of individuals for an entire 3-community area seems very problematic to me. And I think that it really crosses the line into some legal issues as well, whether or not a liquor license can actually be waived. The process can actually, excuse me, whether or not the process, hello? Whether or not the process can actually be waived by a committee of people versus going through the vetting process for the liquor license.
Alan,
And let's not forget that this these events, Capital Flight also makes a significant amount of money, so it's not just a charitable event. So let's kind of keep that in mind as well. And I also wanted to just raise a process issue. And that is that when people come to speak and to share their concerns, it's very problematic that during a public comment time that committee members are allowed to break in, threaten people with, libel suits and things like that, just from a process issue and sort of a fairness and, just kind of a decency issue. It's just not a professional way to run a meeting. And so this has happened before, and I just wanted to mention, I think that needs to be taken under consideration. It's not very respectful. And that's the end of my comments.
All right, thank you very much. Mark, do we have anybody else?
I don't see any other hands up. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak under public comment?
Yes,
I do.
Bryce.
Okay, go ahead, Bob.
I'm sorry. Or somebody else in line?
It's your turn, Bob.
Yes,
Go ahead.
Okay.
If you're not, just a second, if you're not speaking, if you're not Bob right now, could you please mute yourself? Because we're hearing some background from another caller. Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, thank you. My comments pertain to agenda item number 4, potential abbreviated event approval process. The other comments that have been made about the question of why there should be a special process, I would certainly agree with. You should know too that, and I think it's been mentioned, that the application process requires that there is a box on the application form. When the box has to be checked off, it's required, and it wants to know if specific functions or individuals have been contacted about the event and how they might be affected, and there has to be, of course, a listing of those people or functions that have been contacted. It's required, but it was left blank. Interesting. But to move on to other things, I'm not sure the Alcohol Committee was aware of the safety issues involved with having in Spain special events, particularly where there may be alcohol involved. They probably weren't aware of the serious consequences of events that would be a problem of safety. There was a recent AOPA statement, which is the primary hazard, excuse me, at non-towered airports is mid-air collisions in the flight patterns. John, you may remember that you sent an email to Mark Opus on May 23rd, 2019. And in that email, you had made a number of interesting comments regarding to safety. First, we have one of the densest airports environments around. Further, that we have students and on-field pilots locked into mindless orbits around the field. When both runways are in use, you have 2 perpendicular orbits, add in instrumental and turbine straight-in flights, and you have chaos. If you fly a pattern, the pattern speeds are 140 knots, not 80 knots. Pilot patterns are bigger. 95% of the time you come in on a straight approach, Final speeds are 30 knots to 40 knots. Our piston and student pilots do not know how to deal with turbines. The last one is our report is an incident that harms people, destroys assets and fuels anti-airport sentiment. So I think that's certainly something that needs to be considered. Well, to summarize, we'll have possibly multiple aircraft coming in, arriving and departing at non-towered airports, likely with some pilots unfamiliar with the airport, mixture of plane types, different approach speeds, perhaps some flying and drinking. I hope not, but it could happen, with residences and schools on the flight path, not to mention the pollution and noise. It's a situation where few benefit from these events that will be held at the expense of many. So that's my comments. By the way, and speaking of
3 minutes, Bob, your 3
what?
minutes are up. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. I said most of want to say. Thank you.
Thank you,
Gee,
Art.
Mark. Way to go, Mark.
Appreciate your comments.
Steve, would you like to comment? You got 3 minutes.
Mark, thank you very much. I feel that people talking and everybody here has been very respectful for this 3-minute thing. And if somebody needs to finish their orientation in regards to an extra 15 seconds or whatever it might be, I would really appreciate the empathy of the panel, i.e. City of Middleton, to respect that so that people can finish and not feel like this is the Gestapo coming down on them after 3 minutes and confusing them and disrupting their dialogue. Please consider a little lenience with people that have worked very hard to put together an orientation to try to address this committee in a comprehensive way. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
I don't see any other hands up, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Anybody else wish to speak under
Yes,
public
this is
comment?
Dr. Rice.
Okay.
Town
ahead,
of
Dave.
Middleton. Thanks. Thank you very much for letting me make a few comments that try to bring some of this together. They're really no new things, but some I'd like to bring something out into the open. Most of this comment is regarding to agenda item 4 that's really already been discussed. I'd also remember to remind you of the recent talk by Dr. Beth Neary at the Town of Middleton meeting about the effects of lead pollution were already addressed, but the fact that it accumulates and there's really no safe level, and that children are more susceptible to it than adults, and that they can get contaminated more by the lead in the air than they can by some of the lead on the ground. So anything you can do, which is good to find out that there is a lead-free gas available, hopefully the planes will be able to come up to be able to use it as things improve. But also, I want to talk about the meeting and the event, which really has been already discussed. But I would recommend that I don't think the Capitol flight should have a special exemption, and probably because it's the way as Mr. Bartholomew or Dr. Bartholomew said, that the way the application was filled out, it's important that the public have advance notice of such planned flying events, providing with meaningful opportunity to provide public input before the events are approved by the city. I think the license has already been approved. The last thing I want to mention is that we, as all of us, community leaders, residents, people that work here, business, people that own businesses, we're all part of this community. And what I am hearing from almost all the commenters here is that we'd like to be treated, and we should treat each other with mutual respect and recognize that all of us have different opinions. I don't think it's appropriate to use social media, especially public social media, such as the C29 Facebook event, to disparage public figures. And they basically represent the people and are listening to what the people are telling us. So because they have different opinions doesn't mean that they need to be disparaged. Respect, civility, and welcoming public input in a meaningful way would be at the top of the list for all public officials. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you,
And I
sir.
appreciate your comments in the meeting.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments. Mark?
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak under public comment? I don't see anybody else, John.
Okay, with that, we'll close this section of the agenda and move on to approval of the minutes. So I'll give everybody a couple of minutes to take a fresh look and to somebody make a motion once they're comfortable that they've read them.
John, this is Luke. I'll make a motion to accept.
Okay, I have a motion from Luke to accept. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that. Dave Blumey.
Dave has seconded it. So we have a first and a second. Would we, anybody like to have any additional comments or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call that to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
And John, I'll just note for the record that we now have all 7 members present. You probably knew that given who made the motion, but we have all 7 present.
Yes, okay, thank you. Moving on to the next item, which would be chair report. There's really not much new that I can talk to. Most of it will be down in the discussion sections. I made a comment last time, but I want to make another comment tonight, just to make sure that it's publicly aware that there was a request by Maury Airplane Company to extend their agreement, airport manager management, FBO agreement, whatever you'd like to call it, and that the city is entertaining that that request, which is not unreasonable. They do this with other vendors that make a request. And to make sure that it was all inclusive, I took it upon myself to contact Capital Flight to make sure that nobody was on the field was unfairly disadvantaged, and they had no interest. So those discussions are ongoing. Any agreement the airport commission will see, and we will make our comments, and we can move it on to back to the city for final approval. A component of that discussion is the fuel farm, which is one of the 2 kind of essential assets, I'll call them, of the airport complex, which include the fuel and the FBO building, which was privately owned. And we look to continue to consolidate airport assets into the city's ownership. So is there any questions about that I could answer to anybody before I go on? Okay. I just want to make one comment, and then something I thought about that we need Mark to follow up on. With respect to a gentleman asked about electric. I have had conversations with the city about electric and about potential charging stations. Obviously, aviation isn't quite to that point yet. But if aviation does get to that point, and aircraft are of that style are on the field, I'm sure there's something that the city, the airport commission will take up, and we will make recommendations, if you will, to the city. I think there's a lot of work to be done in that area yet. I know that if you get a pilot's license for an electric airplane, will that translate over to a piston airplane? I think there's a lot of rules and regulations to be, a lot of rules and regulations to be formed yet. If you look at the industry, the movements in the industry, there's a lot more motion on electric aircraft than there is the ability to find a substitute low lead. And there's an article that says something to the effect that finding a low lead replacement was much like a moon launch. And they've been after it for some time. But with the new current administration, I think that there may be some possibilities there. So I think we'll wait and see, and we'll adjust with the times, and the Airport Commission will respond appropriately. The one thing, Mark, that I didn't, we haven't followed up on, and I wanted to, it's in the city's hands, I think, and that is the Knox boxes. It was approved by the Airport Commission and then subsequently approved by, I believe, the Common Council, if not city management. So we need to kind of follow up. I don't know if the fire department bought those or not, and we've done anything to get those in place, which we approved, and we've approved funding for. So does anybody have any questions or comments about either the energy, aircraft energy, or the knock boxes that I've just talked about that I could try to clarify?
Yeah, John, just I'm almost positive that those knock boxes came before the city council and we voted on those.
Yeah, I think I saw that too, Luke. And I don't know whose hands it's in now, but it's one of those things where you got to keep chasing it around and figure out to get it done. But thank you for clarification.
The last email I see on this, I just did a search on Knoxbox, so I assume that that is what it would have been.
Yes.
Was back in August, confirming that we had met with Brad from the fire department, who had obtained, that I had obtained authorization from Bill Burns to proceed with the acquisition. And that's the last I heard. So I don't know if they went ahead and did it or not. So if you haven't seen,
can we follow up on that?
Sure.
And if they are not purchased, can we get them purchased? And if once they have possession of them, can we get them delivered to the airport? I believe Maury Airplane Company was going to do the installation.
That is correct, John.
Okay. Yeah, these things fall through the cracks. You got to keep an eye on them.
I thought it was taken care of, to be honest. I didn't know that it was still out there, so thank you.
Yeah, I just happened to think about it as I was running through my mind what we've done in the past and make sure we didn't forget anything, so. Okay, with that, let's move on to the airport manager's report. So Rich, it's up to you.
Okay, I ask permission just to address a couple of questions that were brought up in the public comments section before we move on. Specifically, John, you did a nice job explaining our situation with electric and with the 100. But there's a lot of misinformation out there. There is no direct substitute for 100 low lead right now, as you pointed out. The 100R that Swift Fuel has been working on for almost a decade now is not approved for by the FAA for use. The UL 94 or Swift Fuel that's available at Sauk and at Wanakee is useful in older and or lower compression engines. It is not useful for the more modern aircraft, as Jade pointed out. In the Cirrus, our H2AD engines and several of our trainers, I don't believe have a type certificate for that. I've looked into it. So the fuel tank that has been installed up at Sauk, I know the fellow that did it, he has chuckled about his investment and said, I'll never get my investment out of this. That may or may not be the case. I have certainly no problem with installing it, but again, we're in the transition. The city wants to own tanks, and I want to actually get a return on my investment if I put one in. So
Again, we did a survey. We should probably do another survey. Of the 100 aircraft based here, 12 said they could use the fuel, 7 said they might or would if it wasn't or was at the same price or lower than 100 octane. That's what I wanted to address. As for the neighborhood, any questions along those lines?
You know, the only comment that I have is the planes that can use that, Waunakee pretty darn close. The planes that can use that fuel can go over there and fuel up. I mean, and in fact, maybe it's cheaper for them to do that. So my question is, if it's not, and my observation is that if it's not important for them to go the extra mile to fill up the tank there, would they in fact use it if it was here? Because that's to be determined.
Absolutely. And then something that's often overlooked is since 1980, when unleaded or leaded fuel was basically dropped from car gas, we've seen a 98% reduction in atmospheric lead, 98%. So we've got 2% of what we had in 1980, of which certainly not all of it is coming from aviation, 100 low lead fuel. So it's
the statistic cited were 30+% was from aviation. So that leaves 70-some% that comes from somewhere else. Yeah. I suspect they're cars.
Well, yeah, coal-powered plants, trash burn, a bunch of other items. But anyway, okay. Neighborhood relations, if we wish to go for the report.
Yes, go, sir.
All right. From January 28, 2021 through February 28, 2021, 24 noise or overflight complaints, 19 of which were from one individual, 3 from another, and 1 each from 2 individuals. 21 reports using the city online reporting form, 3 via email, city email. Everyone who wished to be contacted was contacted. Again, upon investigation, the vast majority of these reports were aircraft following the voluntary noise abatement pattern. The flight tracker software was used twice to investigate reports of aircraft flying below pattern altitudes. Both were at pattern altitudes when corrected for unstandard atmosphere. I'll go into detail on what a transponder puts out, but it's set to a standard pressure. If the pressure is higher, then the airplane reads lower. If it's lower, it reads higher.
Okay. In addition, doesn't the air transponder have a plus or minus one or to be certified? Is it 100 foot or 200 foot plus or minus?
It can be up to, well, for certification, I think you're in the neighborhood of 200 feet. It can be up to 300 feet off before ATC makes any comments about it, but don't quote me on that. I don't have the certification requirements in my head, but I do know that ATC won't complain unless you're at least 300 feet off.
So you do have compounding errors.
Exactly.
Because you have the air of the device combined with the air of non-standard pressures.
Absolutely. So the expectation that seems to be out there is that the noise abatement procedures will guarantee that you never have an airplane fly over your house or you never hear airplane noise. And that seems to be the expectation of some. That isn't the case at all. It's designed to minimize the noise footprint for everyone involved in the area. And we're doing our best to do so. Maury flight hours last month were down 64.5%. To 64.5%, excuse me, down about 35% of what they were February 2020. So just FYI. Okay, no accidents or incidents on the field. We conducted one safety seminar by Harold Green, a very senior flight instructor here. It was about traffic patterns, and how to operate in a non-towered environment. We've had our first private pilot ground school class this week. We probably will not be doing a Zoom meeting. I think people have Zoom fatigue, so we'll be postponing this. We only had a few people interested in it. Airport maintenance. that CAT 930 is a very capable and user-friendly and very powerful unit. Very happy to have it. We've been doing some very good work at moving snow with it. Good news, Corey from McFarland's in Sauk City. We're on track to start brush removal in the next few weeks as soon as I get up and running on their new piece of equipment. That's going to be great. Now, we'll get the brush out of the waterways, which is good. I would like to make a request that we continue do some ongoing maintenance as opposed to just let it go and then catch it every 5 to 7 years. It has been suggested by people that know this stuff better than I do that maintenance would require or should be considered a burn in the spring after the all of this, the woody growth is taken off, and then potential goat grazing late spring and fall to help keep down the growth in that area with regular burnings. That's something that we need to look further into, but I'd like to see those waterways maintained. And I know this isn't on the agenda, but our neighbors to the north and to the west, good farmers, I've been watching as they've essentially drainage tiled all of their the fields there, which is good for them, but it means that the pulse of water that comes through the Middleton Municipal Airport is greater than it was when the airport was first designed. It's a good thing that Mead and Hunt over-designed this because it can handle it, but having the trees in the waterway does slow the flow of water out of the airport. I don't believe that that was part of the design dynamics, and it would be useful for us to have those clear in case we have another large event, rain event. Let's see. That pretty much covers everything that I had as an airport manager, other than one of our people did make an inquiry about getting an AED out here, and we're going to be working with the powers that be to try to acquire one. I may have, we may be able to use the Friends of Maury Airplane Company monies that were donated toward the airport for public use toward that end. So we'll see.
What would the ATV be used for?
Oh, that would be simply available in case that we would have a heart attack or someone out here. Most public.
I'm sorry. I would say ATV. You're talking about the defibrillator.
Defibrillator, yeah. I may have said it. Yeah.
So as airport manager, and you have spending authorities, I don't think you have to have something of that nature brought to a boat. I think you
probably not, but it is $1,500, John. And I know I can do that, but I always like to ask first.
But we don't have it as an agenda item, but let me ask maybe we can call roll or something, Mark, and just get the consensus. Can we get the consensus of the airport commission?
Yeah, I don't think we need to call a roll, but I'll just opine. My opinion is I would grant Rich the authority if this was something that was before us tonight. I think that's an important object to have on the airport property.
I think it is too. Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. My only concern is that since it's not formally on the agenda, around just kind of dotting the I's, crossing the T's from a commission perspective.
Okay.
I think it's appropriate for Rich to provide as part of his report the various things he spoke about, but any discussion about items that are not noticed on the agenda that could involve potential funds from the airport fund, I think would be, we should put those on the next agenda.
Agreed.
No problem. We'll put it on the next agenda.
I'm very good with that, as long as it's moving forward. Very good.
I say, as the chair of the airport commission, I would recommend that we have a moratorium on heart attacks at the airport for a minimum of 30 days until we get the appropriate equipment. So, commissioners, does anybody have any comments or questions about the airport manager's report?
Hi, this is Kevin. Just a couple of quick comments. The first one fairly simple. Again, as I've mentioned in the last few meetings, as far as noise complaints, it would be really helpful, at least for me, I can only speak for me, that if we know the difference between, say, an egregious noise event versus just standard practice or best practices, or pilots flying to the current standards, to the current practices and the current regulations, because that's what we're really encouraging here. If they're following the rules and regulations, that's what we want to continue to enforce. Those are the rules of aviation and any strict liability endeavor, if you will, any federal law. So, but it would be helpful if I knew the difference between someone just in the pattern, flying in the pattern, versus someone flying in the pattern and not following either a regulation, a guidance, or best practices. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. It'd be very helpful for me. If it's someone just flying in the pattern and there's noise, airplane noise, that's part of living near an airport. And that's why in the AIP grants, they have strong recommendations to have comprehensive land use plans to let people know, not necessarily the airport, but to allow developers and real estate, folks that work in the real estate industry and people that are buying homes to make them better aware, though it's not zoning, better aware that, say, if you live within 3 miles of the geographic center for an airport, the size of Morey Field, that there's probably going to be noise issues. Just like I live within a couple of mile or two of the belt line, and the belt, it's just a roar of noise 24/7 off that belt line. It's like a lot of the development west of the belt line out Airport Road, it's gotten to be the traffic, the way people drive on that road is so, you know, it's like they're driving in the middle of the Mojave Desert or something. I don't even allow my daughter to, restrict her from driving west of the Beltline on Airport Road because the traffic is so fast and so dangerous out there for people commuting out there. So but it's just part of, it's be careful what you wish for. It's just part of development. So again, I just want to summarize that if folks are, if there's a noise issue, I really need to know if the pilot is doing something very egregious or they're following the regulations, the guidelines, and best practices. I've been out there quite a bit watching. Folks work the pattern for the past 3 or 4 months because of the complaints, and I haven't seen anything, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. I just want folks that are complaining to provide more information on exactly what the pilots aren't doing right, and it'd be helpful for me. And that's it. That's all I have to say.
Okay, well then, if I could address that. Dr. Pavlovic is very good at documenting when people don't follow the noise abatement procedure, and that happens 2 to 3 times a month on average. And so, but now you're in a conundrum because what has happened is they followed the FAA guidelines as opposed to our voluntary noise abatement procedure. So I can make a note of it, but and I can talk and counsel with the people if there's someone that we're able to identify. But especially if you have a commercial operator coming out of here, a charter pilot, a freight runner, their manual may say that you do not vary from the FARs. So they're going to take it straight out and follow the pattern as opposed to try to do something, our voluntary noise abatement procedure. So we're stuck. We have no enforcement authority. All we can do is, at least with based aircraft and aircraft in the area, we can lean on them heavily and ask them politely to follow. And almost always they will. But you can't talk to a fellow whose a charter manual says you're going to follow the departure procedure off of this airport and tell them you can't do it, because they aren't gonna. They're going to follow the FAA regulations. So.
Well, there's, yeah, and I understand that. There's a safety order of precedent. And first are the regulations, and then the, the regulations, the approach plates, stars, SIDS, whatever. And then there's best practices for an airport. So I understand that. What I'm saying is if a pilot goes well beyond that, you know what I mean by that, just buzzing around and flying too low and just doing something, we need to, because we can do something about that. If they're following the regulations and they are, first of all, in an instrument approach, you have to do that. It's a federal law, it's strict liability. You have absolutely no choice. And also it's the safest thing to do. In no way, shape, or form would anyone recommend anything besides that. But what I'm talking about are the more egregious events, and that's what I'm trying to separate. And you're saying, okay, a couple times a month, that's good. That's what I want to. That's what I want to hear about.
But I mean, that doesn't fit into the egregious. That fits. That certainly, I would bring up anyone who's is obviously doing something in violation, and I would be pursuing some kind of action against them. But like you said, we haven't seen any of that out here. I haven't seen any of that that I can recall at any time recently. So,
okay, thank you.
All right,
Rich, just I think for clarity, something you and Kevin just said in your conversation was if they're following the instrument procedures. Well, that instrument procedure comes in. Well, and on the approach to runway 10, that's coming in obviously lined up with runway 10. So that actually goes over some of these residential areas, including one of the speakers earlier is under the instrument procedure roughly. So that might be why some of the aircraft, if they're on instrument approach, whether it's out of necessity or for practice, that's a legal operation. That's my understanding.
That's quite true, Mark. Also, there are departure procedures not charted, but if you look at the if you look at the instrument procedures, they'll tell you precisely what you need to do. For instance, you're going to need to go to 2,600 feet straight out before you take a turn to the south, for instance. That's part of the departure here. And when you're running a charter operation, what you have something that's called an approved manual. The FAA goes over this, and these are the practices that you will follow. And it may state you will follow the instrument departure procedure unless otherwise instructed by ATC. So they have no real recourse. They're going to take it straight out and then get to their altitude and do as instructed.
And again, that is something that can be done as a matter of training and practice, and that's perfectly legal. I think that's the point that I think we're trying to make here, is that just because somebody is not flying the preferred noise, the recommended noise abatement procedure, the locally recommended noise abatement procedure, doesn't mean that they are acting in a way that is either harassment or whatever the concerns have been, which I can understand from a noise perspective, but that doesn't mean that they are targeting anybody. It could mean that they're simply practicing the instrument approach, which is published and has certain procedures as you just described.
Absolutely, Mark. And what I try to do my training as much out at different airports as possible, especially instrument. But if I do my instrument training here, I will limit my people to pattern altitude as opposed to going lower, which is perfectly legal when we do our approaches, unless we're in actual conditions or that's the last flight of the day and they need to come on in and make the landing. So that is what we do to try to minimize our footprint out here. Does everyone that operate out of here do that? No, probably not. But that's something that I've taken on. So, all right, sorry.
Any more comments? Okay, if not, let's continue on to the next item. And we'll let Mr. Burt talk to us about what's transpiring at the MPAC.
Great, thank you. So our last Airport Master Plan Advisory Committee meeting was last week, Thursday, February 25th. The three meeting topics were a subsequent review, an additional review of a newly added air quality subsection of Chapter 4, Chapter 4 being the environmental section of the draft master plan. That was not something that Mead and Hunt had originally done or had been really asked to do, but they voluntarily added it because there was a lot of public comments and some concerns, obviously, related to air quality around the airport. And so they added a section on that voluntarily to the master plan. And there was a robust discussion over that topic. Then there was also kind of a detailed review of the draft alternatives, which was Chapter 5 of the master plan. That was options for runways and hangars. We had discussed that at the prior meeting as well, but this was kind of firming up some ideas after us having like another month to think about it. And then the third topic was kind of AMPAC preferences related to the format of the public open house meeting, which is hopefully to be scheduled soon, maybe March, maybe April. Probably not March, probably April or at latest maybe May.
It definitely won't be March. I want to make sure that
Thank you. Yeah.
So.
Originally we had hoped for March, and then just because so much is still being discussed, so much work had to be done prior to this public open house meeting, that they said, you know, a little extra time would help them, as well as to give us all time to publicize a date for this public open house. So those were kind of the three topics. So then as we discussed that as AMPAC members, the review of 1028, the main runway, the majority view was that 1028 should not be extended in the immediate future, but many of the AMPAC members thought that it might make sense to either leave it the same or slightly extend the runway length by approximately 200 feet during the next time that 1028 is being rebuilt or repaired. So no need to change anything now because it would be tearing up a working runway. But if it's going to be adjusted or modified in the future, there was some of the members were like, oh, that would actually be a good time to maybe just add like 200 feet, but not anything more egregious or extensive than that, I would say. On the 0119 north-south runway, the majority view was that 119 should remain unchanged in length, or it might be modified to move at least the southern end of the runway farther north to prevent overlap between 119 and 1028, and to move potentially the runway protection zone for 119 further north onto airport property. So there was a lot of discussion on that too, but most of the recommendations pretty much were sticking with a grass runway running north-south and not changing the length or even potentially shortening it a tiny bit to get rid of some overlap between the two runways. Third topic was the current left-hand traffic pattern, which is counterclockwise traffic, was discussed, as was the possibility of switching to a right-hand traffic pattern, which would be clockwise traffic pattern. No change was recommended by AMPAC, but both traffic pattern options will be shared during the public open house to gather additional feedback from the public. The last major topic on this section was hangars, and overall support was for the no build condition, not changing the hangar conditions at all. There was some amount of support for alternative 2, which would require land acquisition of farmland just west of I guess, just west of the 47-acre Highwood Circle subdivision in the town of Middleton, or another way of looking at it is just east or right of 119 north-south runway. And some members of AMPAC stated that the lease rates for current hangars should be increased to increase revenue and to decrease demand. And Rich pointed out that the hangar lease rates were just raised by us in this commission for that very purpose. So that was what was discussed about hangars. And the final point, we moved on to what the project schedule was and what the next steps are. So the public open house has not yet been scheduled, but we all agreed it should take place on a Saturday to maximize the ability for people to attend this virtual open house. Possible dates under review are April 10th, 24th, and May 1st. And then we're waiting to schedule our next AMPAC meeting till after the public open house occurs. So it has not yet been scheduled, but will likely occur sometime in May. That is my update. Are there any questions?
Yeah, this is Ray. There was one other comment that was made to not disrupt anything on the north-south runway, the grass, as to affect our tail dragger population at the airport. They need a spot for their airplanes and not to change that north-south. I believe Rich felt that way as well.
What I heard there, and thank you for bringing that up, Ray, what I had heard at AMPAC was don't pave the north-south runway. So in that regards, don't change it. But I definitely heard some support for decoupling 119, the north-south runway, and 1028, the main runway, and that would be changing the north-south runway, but it would just be moving kind of the southern end of it up. So I agree with what you're saying, that like no change to disenfranchise the tail dragger folks at the airport, but I did hear some support for still considering changing the north-south runway somewhat to either move the whole thing further north or to at least move the southern end of it further north. So that's the only clarification that I would make based on what I heard at AMPAC.
Hi, Robert. Dave here.
Hi, Dave.
Yeah, I attended the meeting and listened to that section too pretty carefully. And I think one of the things which was interesting, I don't think Mead and Hunt made clear, and if I'm correct, I think actually Rich helped some clarification there. And it wasn't made clear that, okay, the potential is by changing the north-south runway, it would be shortened initially, which really is very much of a no-go. It would pretty much make the runway pretty useless as it's very short already. But yes, in the whole idea of moving the runway further north, obviously decoupling it, but maintaining the length as a turf runway. That was my interpretation, not my not my opinion, wish, or desire. I'm just stating, what I thought I heard. Now, if you want what I think is good for the airport, I'm happy to state that too. But
I think for right now, we'll stick with what was actually stated at AMPAC. So yes, but thank you.
Yeah.
I think we can make comment because I plan on making one myself.
Okay.
First of all, when you develop the ALP and you have an intent down the road to make this 200 feet or whatever longer, you'll have to show the full 4,200. You'll have to show the full 4,200 on the ALP. So so that's whether or not you do it now or whatever, it'll have to all be shown. According to public comment today, and something I'm disappointed that people aren't really thinking more about, is item 2B, and that is the prevailing wind is actually from the north. And if you paved it and made it like 3,000 foot long, 50% of all of that traffic that goes to the west is going to go to the north and south. You're going to take all of that traffic off, plus you're going to consolidate the traffic patterns so you don't have two patterns going at once. I mean, I wish AMPAC will consider that. I mean, that's just my personal opinion, and I'll just leave it as something that ought to be talked about and thought of, and think about it. And it's really going to help the people to the west, I think. And then the comment I have about the right-hand traffic pattern is, if AMPAC wants to basically recommend that, they should also recommend that the city and the townships come to agreement on a land use that would prevent what's happening to the west happening underneath the north-south runway. There's no sense to do anything and change anything if you're not going to protect it. And we probably should do some noise testing. I mean, we've been randomly changing this departure procedures and everything else. Don't fly over my house, fly over theirs. I mean, we really need some science to follow the science and say, okay, this will help this many houses or whatever. And then put into some kind of place, something that prevents any further building. And if you're not willing to do that, you're wasting your time, because people will build, new people will complain, and then we're going to be right back to where we're at, chasing our tail. So that's my 2 cents worth on that, for what it's worth. Anybody else have any comment? Okay, we'll stop there and we'll move on to the next item. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
So airport financials. So a couple of things happened this month, and I may or may go out of order here. Okay, I'll go out of order here. So we had a meeting with the Bureau. First of all, we had a meeting with Mead and Hunt, and Mead and Hunt took out for bid the lighting. So the lighting went out for bid and returned some quote unquote real numbers. The numbers that we had been working with were the numbers that were estimated by the BOA. So what we talked about last time, these numbers change all the time. I don't know what else to do. It's hard to do, but I think we're getting closer and closer. If you have bid numbers, you have some real numbers. So the runway lights were estimated at 260,000. The bid came in at 238,000. So that's a reduction or a change of $21,000. So this is apportionment money. So think about it as you pay 5% of this money. So that's to us, a $10,000 plus expenditure. The taxiway lights were never estimated, but they were taken out for bid. And there were a lot more lights on the taxiways. And so that number is 344,000. So that's a change, a positive of 344,000. And again, we'd have to pay 5% of that, 15,000 plus. The nav aids came down. So they went from 180 to 123,000. So it's a saving of $56,750, which is, the entitlement money is like gold, because you can only use it in certain places. And certain things you have to use entitlement dollars for. So the goal should be to preserve those at all costs. And then what I learned at the meeting with, I also had a meeting with the BOA, is they estimate engineering at 15% of the construction costs. So if you take the numbers up above and add them up and multiply them by 15%, the estimate for engineering would be not 68,000, but 105, which is a change of $37,000. So the total project, as we were talking about last time, is up about 300,000. The Bureau of Aeronautics, we use their money. So there's categories, apportionment, but there's also discretionary funds. These are the funds that the Bureau of Aeronautics makes a decision on how to spend. They originally, we were talking about a $500,000 project, but they thought that there's value to doing the entire project all at once because the cost of putting contractors on and taking them on and all of that staging of equipment and everything would be would add a lot of costs. So it would be more cost effective for them to just do it all at once. So they're working the numbers, and it looks to us like they will do this all at once. The project would not start until next year. We would get the engineering done, and we may order some materials and stage them this year. So out of our funds, there'd be about 25,000. We probably wouldn't feel that. We probably maybe feel $10,000 of it this year. And we would only feel part of the engineering this year. So that leaves a gap. And there's a gap there for that we could fill the cracks in the taxiway. The taxiways have 1 inch to 2 inch gaps in them. And if you know much about road construction, you know water is not your friend. Water goes through the cracks, makes the soil underneath soft, and the next thing it starts spalling out. So they're pleased that we're thinking about preventive maintenance. And so they think that they can go ahead and maybe fit that in. So the BOA is working this all out now and fit it in between the actual beginning of the lighting project. And so we may get that. And that unfortunately has to be done with entitlements. But they said if we run short of entitlements, they can use some of their discretionary funds to fill in the gap. And then we can pay it back, or there's a lot of interesting things with entitlements that you know that I can kind of talk to a little later. So that's kind of what's going on. If you move it to the next slide, go down a page. So if you carry this across, it's $29,000 out of the airport fund. That would not all happen this year. I'd say maybe 10. And of the entitlements, we would not use the 229,000 this year. We would probably use some of it next year. And we also found some money at the last Bureau of Aeronautics, and I could talk to that now. We found $122,000 worth of entitlements that we haven't been credited. So they're gonna add that to our entitlement balance. So we picked up another $122,000. So that's a good thing. And also the CARES 2 Act will generate for us another $23,000 worth of another $23,000 off. These are just the details for the numbers that I showed you, summary numbers I showed you, so you can, you know, if you want to add them up. Yes, actually the sheet in front, Mark.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, John, I didn't realize this had wrapped to 2 pages. I should have.
Yeah, that's not a problem. If you go up, yeah. So, I mean, hey, so these numbers, the details are actually down below. They're off of the estimate sheets.
Right.
Yeah, so I wanted you to have those, right? So that's it. That's the construction project. We would, when the lighting is being worked on, the airport has to be closed. But in another airport that I've flown into last year in Kentucky, they were doing lighting, and what they did for that one was they opened the airport on the weekends. So they may be able to work hours to where, you know, they let the airplanes come in and go in the morning, and then maybe work a little later and then keep it on. So they'll work with Rich to determine the best way to keep the airport open and make a recommendation to the airport commission. Moving on. So the airport enterprise fund.
So John, just to clarify what you said.
Yes.
Because I had first written that while the lighting project is underway, the airport will have to be closed. What you're saying is while construction is actually underway.
That is correct.
Okay, so it's possible the airport will be open each day for a limited time, or maybe some days it will be closed. But I just wanted to make sure that the headline coming out of this isn't while the lighting project is underway, the airport is closed.
You're absolutely correct, Mark.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
A schedule will be determined by the airport manager and the Bureau of Aeronautics and Mead and Hunt, and a recommendation probably made to us, which would, I would have no problem arguing with it. I would have a basis to argue with it. And then we would, that would be published so that other people would know it. But that's true, Mark. Thank you for the correction.
Well, and if they're working, let's say, on the west end of the runway, I suppose it's possible that they could keep runway.
They closed it.
119.
They closed the whole thing.
Okay.
I flew into Lexington, Kentucky last year, and they were working on one end, and the entire runway was closed. Luckily, I was flying a helicopter, and I didn't have to land on the runway. But anyway, but they did have it open on the weekends. Okay. Okay. Moving on to the airport. This is from Bill. I just want to make a couple of comments. So first of all, if you take a look at the grants, and I said this before, it's 400, and then down below is a capital outlay of 500. That is actually the lighting project. We don't get 400,000, and we don't outlay 500,000. The BOA does that. We get a bill for 10%. So so if you just got rid of the income and got rid of the 500 on the bottom, at the $800,000 mark, we're going to spend 30,000. So the cash to the airport is not going to be $100,000. It's going to be 30,000 over 2 years. This is the old 20%. We're out of that. Okay. Also, if you take a look at the CARES, I don't think he has the grant in here. Where's the grant for income? So he doesn't have the grant in here either. We still have an outstanding balance of $11,000 unless we build them out, and we will get another 23 or 24,000. So there's a lot of revenue we've got coming in and a lot less expenses than what's shown here. And I'll try to get with this stuff is real complicated, and I can't believe I'm starting to understand it. But I think I pretty well got it. I pretty well got it down. So I'll work with Bill to get that right. Any questions about this? Okay.
No questions, John. Just a comment. We're lucky to have you.
Okay. Yeah, in my demented financial state here. Yeah, I'm worried if I'll be able to ever go back into business, because I may be doing funky accounting in a business. Just kidding. It's different. Public accounting is just a little different. All right. Next item down is the tree trimming of the obstacles. Mark, did you hire somebody for that, or how's that moving?
Yes, we've hired Boley Landscaping Service, or whatever the official name is. They're a Middleton company. Everyone knows them. So they will be working with the city to prune in a very aesthetically pleasing and sensitive to the tree manner.
Yes.
The tree that's west of the airport on the Arndt property. I met out there with Mr. Arndt and the representative from Boley, and I think we have, I think we have agreement and consensus on I guess agreement is the right word, but he understands we'll be going forward with this, and he's not objecting to it.
I'm sure he would prefer not to do it,
but he's comfortable. It's safe to say he's comfortable with our approach. That's, I guess, the best summary.
That's a good word.
Yeah. And I asked the tree company to give us advance notice so we can notify him as well. We also want to make sure we do this when the ground is frozen, so that there's, to minimize any damage, but he better get out there quick.
Yeah. So it was ideally it'll happen in the month of March.
Well, and it needs to from a tree health and welfare standpoint.
I get it. I get it.
And then also I revisited with Mr. Rip, who's on Schneider Road, the trimming that will be done from his driveway. All they have to do is appear in the driveway. And that will be so that's Jim Meister, the consultant or the contractor that did the work last year, will be going out there in the next week or two. So I've copied Mr. Rip on my communications. So those are the only two that are left. And then we've fulfilled our obligations in the eyes of the FAA. As I've said at several meetings now, we no longer need to trim any trees on Highwood Circle. That was because of the change in the decommissioning of one of the approaches.
Well, that's lucky for us because it gets rid of the contention.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Anybody have questions of Mr. Opitz? Okay, thank you, Mark. Let's move on to item 3. So the genesis of item 3, and we can add some, I just put together some ideas and stuff. What might go into a survey of this kind. What we're just trying to find out is what is kind of the general consensus from the people that are based. So it's not just hangar owners, it's people that are based, it's businesses, it's anybody that's on the field at the airport. And just, do they feel like what's available is what should be available? Is the quality available there? So I put this together, and this would come into play if there's any modifications possibly to the airport management, FBO agreement. This information could be used by the city in the construction of their draft agreement. So let me just kind of go through what I have here, and then at the end, I'll let you folks tear this apart and reconstruct it, and we'll add whatever you'd like to have. This is just to start a discussion. I started out by asking them the depth and the quality of the services available, and I wanted them to compare this to other non-towered, similar sized airports. I don't think it's fair to compare us to O'Hare or even Madison because of the funding and the types of airplanes and fly in and out. So I wanted to say, let's compare apples to apples. So the first thing is just really about how are we maintaining? Are we getting the snow plowed? Is the grass mowed? Is everything done from an airport grounds maintenance perspective covered? The next is what they call landside facilities, and that is our hard goods, our runways, our taxiways, our lights, our gates, our fencing, our ramps. All of that is the maintenance on that, what you would expect it to be. If you have potholes or whatever, they will call that out here. The next area was the airport terminal building. Is the airport terminal building, if you went into it, is it clean? It's got places to sit, and can you get a cup of coffee? I mean, what does that look like, and the services associated there? Then I thought I'd throw in the air side, the instrument approaches and procedures. I mean, do you feel like you have the approaches and the procedures in place that promote safety, right? And comfort in the air when you're there, and or is there something else that we need to do, something different? Airport maintenance service is always big. I tell you, there's nothing worse than having an airplane break somewhere and not have anybody be able to fix it, and try to figure out how to either get your airplane there or how to get maintenance people to you. So that's, I think, a critical service. Here I've added fuel options and availability in here. They can talk about no lead, ultra no lead, low lead. Are the pumps operable all the time? Just what is that kind of, can you get what you need the way that you want it served? Then I added the kind of the FBO services. the common things are people will pull out an airplane and maybe they'll put it in front of the terminal building, or they'll come over and they'll fuel it for you. Pilot training and education. I know we have tail wheel. I mean, people getting the tail wheel training. I know we have some amphibians on the field. Do they need training? Is there any remedial training people need? They feel that would make them better pilots and be safer. And then I just left what other services, this is kind of throw it in like as we expand the airport, assuming they do, and assuming they put in more hangars, what kind of businesses might we put on the field? You know, avionics is something every 2 years, you got to do a biennial flight, or you have to do static checks, and, you know, we have to bring somebody in to do that. You know, maybe painting, I don't know, upholstery. There are other kinds of things that would bring commerce on the field, and those might be things that people would see valuable. And then finally, I just left it as it's any additional comments in case I forgot anything here. And the way I structured the document is just a free form. It'll take more energy for me to help categorize those than putting in a bunch of check boxes. But if you do check boxes, you don't really know what people are thinking. I'd rather just have them free form, write it out, and then we'll just go to the labor of taking it apart and putting it into categories. So that's what I thought. I know Michelle had a comment. So let me just ask Michelle. Michelle, you had a comment on this. Can you remind me what it was?
I just also said that maybe we should ask what C29 does really well.
Okay, so we could add that question. Is there anything you feel that C29 is exceptional at?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be fine. Would be more. We can add that. Other commissioners, any questions, comments? What else should we? Is there anything we should add? Anything we should reword?
This is Robert.
Hey, Robert.
I would suggest that we have both free form questions and answers as well as maybe some multiple choice. I know when I'm doing surveys, you know, there's times where I will do all of the multiple choice things, and then I pick and choose which ones I want to answer more fully with a free form response. My only concern with a survey that is all free form is that people will be like, well, I'm only going to answer 2 of these because only 2 of these are, and then the problem with free form is it's a lot harder to kind of capture areas of agreement, because somebody will write, oh, I want to, you know, I want to talk about the runways, or I want to talk about the airport grounds maintenance, and then somebody else is going to say something about the terminal building, and it's really hard to like group, you know, like 10 responses to be, you know, I'm batching these together because these were all similar responses, when you don't give them any real structure to answering the question.
We did this at the town of Vermont. So one of the things we did at the town of Vermont is obviously we're a ag exclusive township, and we're trying to determine kind of how do we manage our growth, and you know, are we providing the services are we needed. The problem we had was we asked what we thought was the right questions. Unfortunately, it wasn't the questions that the people that really wanted us to ask, because normally when you do this, you'll do a focus group and you'll get a lot of people together and you'll start an open discussion, and then you'll start journalizing individual topics. I mean, I've done this a number of times. And so my biggest fear is I'm making an assumption of what's important to them when I create a bullet point. What we can do, I think, is maybe we start with something free form, and then we could always, since we're going to just do it by email, we can redesign it, if you will, and categorize it and do a second one if there's something we think we missed. It's multiple times, there's no cost, you know, other than my labor, which, you know, is free. But you know, market research is something I've done quite a bit of. So,
John, what about the kind of a combination approach whereby perhaps, and I'm just spitballing here, you know, there's both a rating system, like how would you rate C29 on airport grounds maintenance, 1 being poor, 5 being excellent, and then also a free form in case they wanted to add any additional comments on top of that rating?
I would have absolutely no problem with that. That's a lot more general because you're doing the category.
Right.
So I would say there's a thing called a Likert Scale. So I would probably use like a 7-point Likert Scale, and I would just give them 7 dots and say, you know, awful is on one end and stellar's on the other end, and then you figure out where you want to go, and just pick some number between 1 and 7. We'll eventually start grouping those together, and we'll bring it down into something more manageable. But I think if you're going to do something like that, a 7-point scale probably does pretty good. So under each one of these, can please rate and then provide your, you know, detailed comments, right? And yeah, I think that's a good idea. I like that better than saying under airport facilities, you know, I don't know the question to that. Do you think we have potholes? Are the cracks filled? Should we seal it? You know what I mean? You could chase your tail on something like that. But if you're just saying, do you think we're as good as other people, that's pretty doable.
What I'm hearing you say, and I like this idea from Luke too, and the 7-point scale, the hybrid of what you both have said. So for each one, you could say, you know, on the one end of the scale, you could say below average compared to the other airports. In the middle is average, and then above exceeds, and then let the comments, people can write whatever.
And then, yeah, please, you know, please rate, and then, you know, provide detailed comments. And then we'd email this out, I mean, using Deb, once we had the form, and then we'd let them, I suspect we'd let them print it unless you want to, I guess the city probably under Civic Plus probably has survey capabilities. I would think that something like that probably does exist. So if you wanted to do it as some kind of a modifiable PDF or whatever the city has, I mean, that would be good. And then the city could just provide the data, and I'll do the crunching. I don't really mind doing it. You know, I'm kind of homebound. I've only had 1 vaccine shot. You have about 5 more weeks before I'm set free. 2 weeks after the last shot.
Yeah, I agree with Luke. And yeah, I mean, if it's just this, you know, I mean, this survey is really for the set population of hangar owners. So that bounds it quite well there to just say, we're only asking people who currently own a hangar at C29.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it could extend. I mean, if we want to have some paper versions of this and just have it at the FBO building for when people come in, you know, because we are service, we do provide service to all aviation. And, you know, as we go forward over the year, we can see how other people rate us. Would be kind of fun.
Sure.
You know, but for now, yeah, for our task at hand, it's to deal with this now.
I might also recommend that this is always tough with surveys, but since this is such a constrained number of people that we're surveying, it feels to me that we would need something in here that says, kind of confirm that, you know, either give us your name, and maybe that's voluntary, maybe that's mandatory, or at least give us, you know, like at least a group of hangars so that we're like, okay, because otherwise you might get people who don't even own hangars trying to respond to this, and that's not really what we're going for.
I think that you make a good point. I think we should ask for the person's name, or we should ask for the hangar address.
Yeah, I think for this type of survey, that's going to be a requirement.
Yeah, I think you're right too, because if somebody said the taxiway is bad, I'd like to know where they're at.
Good point. Yeah,
And,
it's
you know,
locational information.
right? The location would do as well. I mean, this is, like I said, just a fire starter. This is, you know, formed through our conversations here. And then the city will use that if they find that there's something they want to include in the airport manager's airport contract, and then add that and as a performance requirement.
Makes sense. And John, thank you very much for putting down your initial thoughts. I think it's you've got all the major topics. It's just now a matter of the format of the final survey.
And you know, Mark and those guys can do it if they have the software. That's great. And then we could, you know, help you guys take a look at it. David Lorman, what do you think? Kevin, what do you think? Ray?
John, I've got a suggestion. This is Richard Morey.
Okay, Rich, I should have called on you. Sorry.
No worries, sir. I would like to see, we could easily identify not only the hangar owners, but all aircraft that are based here, the owners of them, and we could have them respond by their N number. Because we have maybe, what, 48, whatever hangars, depending on how you count the units.
Yeah.
But we have over, or close to 100 aircraft based here. Some are multiply owned. Some are owned by just, you know, a couple of people, have a few. But yeah, I'm pretty sure we could identify, well, we have an email list of, I believe, all of the based aircraft here, and we'd happy to supply that. We want to make sure that everyone who actually is here gets surveyed if they want to be part of it.
Well, why don't we add, Mark, to this, not only the hangar address, but the N number? And then after we get it, we could look and see for any omissions, and then we could just try to get those. You know, we'll just manage it. We'll just knock on some doors, pull some doorknobs.
Mm-hmm. Another question, do you want to survey the flight school students, the renter pilots, and or maintenance you know, people? So there are people that come in here that aren't based here, that do maintenance here. Just a question. We certainly don't have to, but that's something to be raised.
You know, I think that would be valuable. Maybe there's a question. Maybe there's a question that said a box. It says based or not based. Either they're based here or they're not.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
I think potential students, incoming students, that's a huge part of aviation, and I think there'd be some value to that.
So how do you want that to read?
I would just have a question that says, are you based at Charlie 29 or Middleton Municipal Airport? That would be the question. And then they'll either say, yes, we're based here, meaning they have a hangar or business, or they're not, which means they're transient.
We don't obviously have to work on this now. I just was capturing
I
ideas.
understand you're just trying to capture the ideas before they fleet. They head out.
So basically what I'm hearing is, this is an example here of the format, is what I'm hearing, that the commission likes that approach.
Give them plenty of room to type. They
Right,
don't
well,
have to
yeah.
use it all, but if they feel verbose, let them rock and roll. David, Ray, comments?
No, I think it's pretty complete. Just the start of it.
David?
We could also go back and look at some of the answers that Mead and Hunt got on that survey they took.
Yeah, I mean, the focus here, as I understand it, John, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the author, isn't so much on facility needs as much as it is condition of existing facilities and the service provided. that's kind of the sense of, so it's different. I mean, we can, I don't think the Meet and Hunt survey captured some of that. That was
Yeah,
more
I think
about
we just change it to airport quality of service survey or something like that. If we're gonna go beyond hangar owners, then we just, basically, it's a quality, it's a quality survey.
Well, if you're going to go after non-owners, non-hangar people,
Well, it's people that use the airport.
yeah. So
It's airport use.
then we're I don't know if I'm opening up a can of worms here, so please feel free to say that you're overboard. But so there are those who don't own airplanes and they just rent. So I think this, it's good to know that. So you ask them if they're a renter or not.
That's a possibility, sure.
What about the same question asked of any one of these people? How do we compare to other airports? What kind of feed in can we get from them as far as what other airports are supplying them that we don't?
Well, we're actually kind of getting the comparison in the 1 through 7, but they're rating us, but we don't know what they're comparing us to, right? So we don't know if they're comparing us to Aurora or Juneau or one of the other ones. But
why is the N number necessary? I don't have an objection to it necessarily. I'm just wondering why it matters.
It doesn't matter.
Because if you're a renter, you're not going to know that.
I'm sorry, Mark, I didn't understand the comment.
If you're renting a plane, you don't necessarily have an N number. You're renting whatever is available.
Yeah, that I wouldn't worry about that because I answer questions like that all the time, and they have areas for renter, and you just put rent in, and you're done with it. So don't worry about it.
Just leave it. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't care either way. I just
it's fine.
Yeah, Rich, you're the one that thought about the N numbers.
Well,
right?
I think the N numbers would be to make sure that this is we have to differentiate. If we just wanted based aircraft and hangar owners, that's one thing. Now I think we just want to identify who is actually filling this out because we want transparency. We want to make sure that these are airport users. So if we want this to be valid, we need to make sure that there's some kind of traceability there. And on a second note, and I'm sorry to jump in, but I really, considering what we've been seeing, I would like to see a question. Do you want 94 UL available? And I'd like to see, do you want more hangars available? I'd like to see 2 questions like that. I know that may not be completely germane to what we're trying to do here, but it would, perhaps answer that question a little bit more in detail.
So do you want it available is what you said instead of would you use it?
Yeah.
Or what are you getting at?
Or would you use it if it were available? Something, actually, like I said, I just did an email to all the hangar or the based aircraft and asked, and only got really about 12 responses. I think we should ask again.
And what was your other question, Rich? Sorry.
Oh, on hangars, do you feel we need more hangars here? Or something along those lines.
If I was going to ask the fuel question, I'd probably also ask them how many gallons a year they're going to use.
Oh, yeah, that would be a great option. Yeah.
Do we have any data? Do we know how many students or people are engaged in, call it training?
Per year.
And how many people rent and how many people, I don't know how far you want to go on this thing. Trying to get a snapshot of that kind of usage.
The gallons used markedly per year. And you have to have a time frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, and really asking a rental pilot or a student pilot that question's kind of irrelevant because they don't really know, they don't own an airplane yet. So yeah.
Yeah, but see, you as the FBO owner would answer that.
Ah, yeah.
You would answer it on behalf because you're the guy buying the fuel.
I'm a little leery about asking if people feel they need more hangars here because we have the airport master plan process that's underway, and that was meant to address that issue, and I'm almost concerned that could lead to conflicting information one way or the other.
If you're collecting it somewhere else and there's a motion available, I don't think you should duplicate.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, John.
Yeah, I agree, Mark, or sorry, that makes perfect sense. We already have one valid survey.
Yeah, I mean, we had that big debate already, and I just,
take it out.
I would suggest you take it out.
Yeah, well, we shouldn't. I mean, this is quality of service to begin with. But we can't throw in the gallons because up above we ask about fueling and fuel availability. And I think that fits in. I mean, if you want to draft something up, Mark, when you're done, if you want to circulate it.
Yeah, I won't circulate it to everybody because I just, I'd rather work with you, John, and with Rich. But if anybody has any other suggestions individually that you didn't think of tonight, feel free to reach out to, I've sort of taken this on right now, but I'll obviously work with Rich and John.
Okay, so just to set an expectation. So we'll spit this thing up and then is it realistic in the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, kiddo.
That we can
How'd you do? Hey, girl.
You want to mute whoever?
Yeah, I'm going to. I just had to figure out who it was.
Yeah, you should just mute everybody in the commission.
I generally do, but I don't want to mute. Sometimes someone's on a telephone and I don't want it to be a commission member. So I did that once where I muted a couple times now, and I don't want to.
I understand that, the ins and outs of Zoom. Yeah. Okay, so maybe in the next couple of weeks we could try to get this firmed up, and then you'll let us know if Drew can do this in-house or it needs to be done with email. And
if Drew, well, our IT staff wouldn't administer a survey.
So yeah, but if it was once the survey is complete, does the city of Middleton have a survey module where we would ask people to go online and fill it out, or are we going to send a PDF, ask people to fill it out, scan it, and send it back? I'm looking at the mechanics now.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people nowadays would prefer an online survey. There's obviously some people, Ray Fay, who might prefer a paper survey. Ray, I'm just teasing you.
I didn't hear you.
That's just as well.
Well, they've got, there's freebie software out there that, you can do these kinds of survey and all the rest of these things.
Right.
Yep.
Most of the surveys that are sent out, you indicated we had 12 come back on something else earlier. I can't remember what it was.
We just don't want any dead pilots sending back surveys.
Yeah, they get tired of it,
Well, I'll talk with Rich. I mean, Rich has some experience with surveying the hangar community out there, the based aircraft community. I wasn't necessarily seeing that I would take all this on myself, frankly, but okay. I can. We'll figure that out. We'll continue our discussion.
So you guys, all you have to worry about is a miracle will happen and the survey will go out.
Right.
And then we'll find out. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, Mark, just a heads up, Mike Davis had the expectation that Polco would be handling the survey when he spoke to me, but maybe I misunderstood that.
I was going to say that I thought that he would probably want to do that, but I didn't, we hadn't had those conversations, so I didn't want to suggest that. We obviously have a contract with Polco. I just want to, there's obviously people who maybe don't use Polco. We want to make sure we give the opportunity to respond. So, but I think what I'm hearing tonight is the focus. I actually highlighted the title. I'm not necessarily enamored with the idea of what I highlighted. Yeah. So survey regarding C-29 airport services, we could just keep it that way, I guess, and not have that at all.
Yeah, I would just, it's basically, it's like I said, it's really about the quantity and quality of our services by these categories. So, we want to make sure that we're on par with other like airports. And if we're not, tell us why.
Yeah.
Right? It's pretty simple.
And we asked about owners and renters of planes. Are students a third category?
Well, they'd probably be renting.
I don't know how that works. I didn't know if every student comes in and just has a separate rental agreement, or if they just consider themselves students going to.
Yeah, you're kind of right. It's all kind of bound together.
If renter covers it, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I just thought that was maybe a third category that we would want to capture as people who use the runways and taxiways and stuff.
It's a good point.
Yeah, Robert, I look at students as in active training, rental pilots as students who have graduated and are still renting here. So it's a slightly different group. And occasionally you'll have a student that has their own aircraft and they'll bringing it in and out and doing work, but are out of here. So yeah, it's a similar but somewhat distinct group.
So we'll make sure we capture them, Robert.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Is there any more questions or comments? I think we're just going to have to dive in and tweak it up. But have we got it? Have we got everything from everybody that's so that we can run with it? Or, I mean, if we're good, then we should move on. Okay, hearing no other comments, let's call this complete and let's move on to item 4. So before we start item 4, I want to just make everybody sure, because I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding about some of this. I talked to the city of Middleton before I put this on the agenda, because I thought it was important to get the city's take on this, because I didn't want to really undermine any department's processes and powers, right? I don't want to step on everybody's toes. So the city has ordinances, just like the township we have ordinances, and town of Middleton's got ordinances, and they cover a whole lot of things, and meetings is usually one of them. So these ordinances are not going to be, I'll call them immutable. They're not to be changed as a rule, right? We cannot go beyond them. So there's 3 hard stops here, okay? One of them is the head count. The head count of 200 is a hard stop. If you are under 200, you don't really even need a permit of any kind. Alcohol is a hard stop. You have to have an alcohol permit. Regardless of what the airport does, we can't grant alcohol permits. We can't allow alcohol to be served. That's a city ordinance. We're within the city, and we have to abide by all that. Amplified music is an ordinance. If you're going to have amplified music, you need a permit for amplified music. So that's not something we could say, oh, you can have a band, you can have whatever it is. So that we don't have the right to do that. We really don't have the right also to have cars parked up and down Airport Road and strewn all over the place, impacting traffic and safety routes and all that. All we can really do is say, hey, you can have an event. And what we're doing from our side, I think, is we're making sure that the event is compatible with airport operations, because you don't really need a permit for less than 200. And if you're not going to serve alcohol, you don't need a permit, right? If you're not going to have a band, you don't need a permit. So, I mean, you can gather. So a lot of these things, like if you wanted to have 50 people and have a party in a taxiway, all the hangar owners, you probably could do that, but it may be disruptive. So my take on all of this is that these are events that are on the airport that do not spill over into the public, to the city's other property, does not have over 200 people, does not have alcohol and without a permit, and does not have amplified sound. So that is what I understand as of now. So I don't know, is Matt on the line here somewhere, Mark? Is he Matt out there in
I don't know if he is on the line.
Okay.
I don't see him.
Mark, we are on the line.
Okay, Jade is, okay.
So Mark, or Matt, excuse me, why don't you just kind of tell us what you're thinking here, what you're asking for?
Can you hear me, guys?
I think Jade is on the line.
But they're both there.
Yep, we're both here.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you're up, Matt.
So I think that the precipitus for the request really came from us desiring to do more community-focused events out there. Things of the nature of a, drive-in movie night on the hangar for folks and things like that, where the process was somewhat time-consuming, but also, dollars for application fees and things like that. So being able to shorten the span of those efforts and getting that approved through the Airport Commission, as most of our events, of course, have to go through Airport Commission anyway, or at least we always have, as a courtesy, if nothing else,
yes,
was really what was the notion for this.
So let's just take as an example movie night, okay? So as you envision movie night, this is just as an example, trying to understand, you would have, I don't know, you throw a sheet on the hangar door and, put the, red tails, and you're going to show the red tails on it and have some people together, maybe some food.
Yeah, we'd have food trucks out and invite the community to basically bring a chair and come out and enjoy the event. And if the event were to go over 200, which maybe it won't, maybe it would be something that we wouldn't necessarily be able to predict those things.
Yeah, well, I think the problem would be if you ran over 200 and it became, listen, nobody's going to be out there with a clicker. But if you came with too many people, then then the Airport Commission would not approve anything in the future, right? Because we do have an obligation to, and these rules, as explained to me, these applications go through the fire department and the police department to make sure the city isn't in violation of any other larger governmental bodies. Dane County may have some rules, the state may have rules, and so everybody's trying to make sure we don't color outside the lines.
Yeah, and I think that it was when we come to the Airport Commission with this request for whatever it might be, if they say, hey, this is beyond the scope, we think that it's a larger scale event, that it should go to L&O and the traditional process, we're happy to do that. It was something that if the council wanted to put that in the Airport Commission's and airport managers' hands to say, hey, this is going to be a family, community, whatever kind of event that we're looking to throw, we can handle this internally. It just makes it easier for us to be able to host and do those events.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask Matt about this?
This is Robert. I would suggest that the 200 person limit is a very hard limit if you're not going to seek something. So I think what you would find is if we started down this path, if you started seeing that like your very first event, you're above 140, you might want to consider that you're coming up, you're getting closer and closer to this hard number that would be a problem for everybody. So if you're not going to seek all of the approvals, because as stated earlier, it's not required that you have an approval for a gathering of people under 200. But if you see yourself throwing events that it's getting closer and closer to that 200 number, I'm just going to go out and say it, that you should probably start going back and seeking approval from other bodies, because there's too much of a risk that you will go over one of these requirements. The other topic I had, and I'm not sure how this works, but people gather, and like I've gone to picnics where there's no alcohol served, but 5 or 6 people bring a cooler full of their own drinks. And I don't know how that falls into this whole thing either, of alcohol that's not served, but alcohol ends up being present. I think the last one, the sound, amplified sound, you can control that pretty much 100%. So I'm not very concerned about that. If you're not going to have amplified sound, then no worries.
Yeah, I mean, the airport commission could say, first of all, we'll have to ask. We'd have to ask or make a request to the Common Council. I mean, we could say 150, right? I mean, if we want to be well beyond say we want to just approve everything, below 150, because any event we have to approve anyhow, right?
Right.
Because,
from an airport standpoint.
Yeah, because of safety in the airport. And I don't know how we're going to police any of this, to be honest with you.
Well, and I think below 200, below 200, you don't need an approval anyway, is my understanding.
Well, you do on the airport, because the airport has to approve an event.
Absolutely, but from a city standpoint is kind of what I'm saying. And if it's an event that goes over that, sometimes when you invite the community to an event, you don't necessarily anticipate what the success rate of that event may or may not be, and we certainly don't want to catch ourselves exceeding a number that is a hard stop and having that be a problem. So we wanted to talk about it before we start really doing that.
No, I get it. I mean, once you make an invite, and if it's a community invite, but the question becomes, what if 300 people show up? I mean, what do you do then? Where do they park?
I think if 300 people want to come to the airport to watch a movie and eat at food trucks, we are pretty happy about it.
Yeah, I understand, but from a standpoint of spilling out into the community outside the bounds of the airport, that's problematic, because we can't shut down Airport Road.
Absolutely, and we agree. And fortunately, between the pancake breakfast and Rock the Ramp and all the other things that have happened at the airport that are fairly large scale, the field that is between the terminal and Capital Flight has been a tremendous asset for that. And I think the pancake breakfast served over 1,000 people on average, and they've been able to contain all of that on the airport.
But those 1,000 people haven't necessarily been there all at one time.
That's true.
Anymore.
No, but if you were
Rock the Ramp will be the same way. People come and go,
I would agree.
Yeah.
Rich,
you're
ultimately
go ahead. I'm sorry, Matt.
It ultimately just comes down to making it easier for us to throw events for our community at our airport is really what what this is. It's not about trying to negate or bypass regulatory process. It's just about making it easier for us to do great things for our community.
Well, we can't approve anything that would allow you to break any rules. So, because those rules are defined by ordinances, and the city is not going to change the ordinances. That's a big deal. Changing an ordinance is a big deal. So all we could do is from our end, say this is a airport compatible event, and you know that we think you should do it, right? It's good for the community, it's good for aviation, but again, we really can't do anything beyond what the city. I don't know, am I saying that clear, Luke? Am I get that across?
No, I'm tracking, John.
Okay, all right. So I feel like I'm kind of chasing my tail here for a minute, but I don't want to step on I can't color outside the city's lines.
I will note that we have not only the two alderpersons that are part of the airport commission on the line, but I see that Susan West, another alderperson, has her hand up. Would the chair recognize?
Absolutely. Susan, go ahead.
Okay. What I'd like to say is I served on the L&O committee for about 10 years. And I would suggest that Matt and Jade go over with the city attorney that staffs that, Matt Fleming, and perhaps Jeremy Geisler, Captain Geisler. Basically describe what you want to do and see what the city requirements are. Because we have to issue permits for, I know it's street closings, but for little kids to run races through the city with maybe 100 people. So I don't remember all the little details, but considering that certainly I have heard comments from opponents of the airport, I think it would be a good idea just to talk with Matt Fleming and be sure all the I's and T's are dotted and crossed.
Well, when we have, Susan, when we have a request, I think we should have probably a procedure. And that procedure would be to invite those people, maybe the chief of police, I don't know, whoever, looks at these things and, weighs in during that item on the airport commission. And then that would be meaningful information to the commissioners to approve or disapprove something. But as I said, I don't want to break the law, break the rules.
Right,
but I'm all about making things easy.
I think it might be easier than what we're thinking, but I don't remember all the rules either. So that would certainly be either this commission or Matt or both. Definitely be in contact with Matt Fleming because he's the attorney that staffs this and knows all the state regulations and the city regulations.
Okay, thank you for your comment.
Okay.
Rich, you had something else you wanted to say.
Oh, just for the record, in the past, Capital Flight, Matt and Jade and company have worked very well, I think, with the city, certainly with the airport, gotten all their permits in line, and they've had some very, very good events down there. And I say not good just for in the regard that people enjoyed them, but there's been a great deal of money raised toward worthy charities with all of this. I just wanted to point that out. I know most of you already know that, but there's never really been a problem with working with them, setting up the parking and doing what we needed to do through channels in the past.
Okay. Thanks, Rich. Commissioners, what do you think?
Well, I'll start. This is Robert. I think this is, I'm glad they brought this to us so that we can weigh in, but I do think at some point the idea of what constitutes something that wouldn't require L&O approval or Common Council approval or whatever probably does need to be taken at least once to Common Council or L&O or both. And then I think what could happen is the city could set up the guidelines that allow to make it very clear at what point are you safe and at what point do you start going to that gray area where you're unsafe, and at what point are you absolutely not, you're running afoul of one of our city ordinances. And I appreciate you bringing it to the airport commission. I do think that there may be a couple other groups that need to weigh in to give you a definitive answer. But from what I've heard and what I understand, if you're under 200 people, there's no alcohol served, you're not obstructing traffic in any way, and you're not blasting noise outside where other people are going to be affected by it, it's probably going to be fine. And then the airport commission's role is to make sure, in addition to all of that, you don't have people walking across, runways or something, that would obstruct airport related functions. So thank you for bringing it to us. I don't know that we can give you a definitive answer tonight, but maybe we can get there with a few more discussions with a few other groups within the city.
Well, I think what we can do is I think we can, assuming the majority of the airport commission chooses to do this, I think what we can do is we can make a request to the Common Council in the city that the airport commission has an interest in being able to approve applications on their own for airport events that don't spill out into the community, whatever that means, and then ask them for for approval and guidelines. Right? And then beg your pardon?
I was just gonna say, would that be the council or would that be the L&O committee, License and Ordinance Committee?
I have no idea the inner workings of the city of Middleton. So you Common Council guys have to tell us that.
I'm thinking it would go to L&O, right, Robert and Susan?
Yeah, the only question. Go ahead, Susan.
L&O, if they have to set up some new guidelines, that would need to go to council.
Right.
I think all of this needs to be reviewed in terms of the special event permit, which we put in place quite a few years ago to cover all sorts of events. And I don't know if you've read through that, but it's about a 2 to 3 page thing where you check off yes and no. And it covers almost everything. And I think what Matt is proposing would be covered by that. But I would feel better if we let Matt Fleming look at it. He could then tell you, does it need to go to L&O to come up with some sort of new way of getting it approved? Can we delegate some to the airport commission? Or it might be for special events, there's just a line on that form that's already there where we check off, is this going to be at the airport? Has the airport commission given its blessing? Yes, no.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe the most immediate step is review by Attorney Fleming, who can provide further clarification. I would say, I would request, not to leave Capital Flight hanging out for so long that perhaps we automatically make this a discussion or action item for the next airport commission, and then we can.
Okay, I guess I'm having trouble understanding why just filling out the special events permit isn't adequate and getting approval.
Matt, you want to answer that?
Yeah, and Susan, thank you. I think that you're frankly on the right track with what we're trying to accomplish. I think that some of these things might come up very quickly, where it's like, hey, the weather this weekend is going to be beautiful. Let's get a food truck or two out here and have a movie night.
Okay.
So it's possible things might
That's
be pretty
doable. Capital Brewery has a long-term, season-long permit for exactly that type of thing. And they get it once.
And the avenue that we need to go. But between it being quick and to your point, Susan, where you were talking about kind of boxes to be checked, perhaps when we go in front of L&O, if that's the avenue that we go, which is completely fine, is, this is a community, for community event, and, we waive fees for that, or tourism plays a role, which we work with tourism very closely on a lot of our events. Whatever it is, again, we're just trying to be able to be a bit more agile and do these community events that we've long wanted to do at the airport a bit easier and a bit faster than we were.
I think that's already in place. You might also bring this up with Jeremy Geisler, but I know we do have some entities that get a season-long permit for special events. And so they don't have to come back for each particular event.
Yeah, and I think Kiva does too, right across the street. So perhaps that is the avenue that we should go to. But we certainly want to have the community understand and know that these things are happening, because we're trying to ultimately engage them in participating in them. So whatever that looks like.
I think there's a way to get what you want that would make it easy, and you don't have to fill out paperwork all the time, and keep down comments about how you're skirting getting approval. I think if you'll talk to, you might start with Captain Geisler first. Have you met with him before?
Full in the past, so I will absolutely reach out to him.
Yeah, because he's incredibly helpful.
Okay, so let me just kind of summarize back where we're at here. So Susan can't make any motions, but we appreciate her expertise and her comments for sure. So as we just at this point table it, commissioners, and let Matt engage with the people that Susan recommended. And then if you give us the name, give me the name, I can follow up with them too, or however you'd like to do it. And we can find out what it is. Regardless, the people, the airport community is still going to know about the event, because the airport is going to have to approve anything that's on the property from a safety standpoint. And so it's going to be on our agenda, which is public, and it'll be discussed, which is public. So community will know. There's nothing that'll be not totally transparent. So I'm not too worried about that. So Matt, are you good with that answer, and that you will engage with the city and then let us know what we need to do next, or at least maybe give me some minutes of that discussion so that we can try to follow up and help you get what you need.
Yes, that is very helpful. Absolutely.
And Matt, I would say you're free to call me and I can look over. I was looking over earlier tonight your application that has gone before L&O, and I can talk you through a little bit of that and questions that you might want to ask. So if you want to contact me, that would be fine.
Absolutely. Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
All right. So unless any of the commissioners have a comment on this item, I say we move on to potential future events and agenda items. So the only thing we have currently in limbo is maybe we will have to take up the airport approval process, event approval process. So that's to be determined. I'm sure we will have more information from the BOA and others on the status of the projects. And the survey will know, we should have a status up on the survey. Make sure we know where that's at and how it's going. Does anybody else have any additional information or items that we should take under discussion or consideration? And as always, if you come up with something between now and a week before we publish the agenda, we'll take a look at it and try to make sure everything fits together. together.
My only question is, if the commission, airport commission has a desire to approve, I mean, not approve, pursue some type of new drafted process where if somebody brings an event or a request for something to be held on the airport property, it'll be a checklist where we simply look at it and say, well, you know, this qualifies within a category where it has to be pushed back to L&O because the size of the event, potential alcohol and amplified sound issues, or simply because it isn't based on size, alcohol, or amplified sound, then it's just at the airport commission's discretion to make a decision.
I think that as a product of Matt's conversation with the people inside of the city, they're going to give us what goes onto that document. And then I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, the process, I'm a firm believer that all processes should be standardized.
Yes, that's really what I'm getting at, because I mean, obviously the airport has a history of literally decades of hosting events, especially around, you know, nonprofit EAA, Young Eagles. And of course, obviously there's events that do require ordinance handling, pancake breakfast and things like that. So I'm just saying, I guess what I'm cautioning is, I don't want to open up the door here to create new rules, processes, and policies to complicate the process on one hand. On the other hand, if somebody on the airport property comes to the commission, whether it be a capital flight or EA chapter or someone we're not aware of, this doesn't turn into a drawn out process where we tell them, I'm sorry, you know, you got to go here and you got to go there, and we're not going to discuss this for another 30 days. And you know, one as a community and as aviators, and we all know that 30 days from now, the seasons are going to change, the weather's going to change, everything's going to change. So I just don't want it to turn into that kind of process for anybody who comes to us.
I totally agree. I mean, the request was simplification, and we shouldn't add 3 or 4 layers. But I think right now, it sounds like we don't really know enough of all the details because it's not something we deal with, that we need to get, what Matt's asking for may already exist. We may need to do nothing. Right?
John, I think you just said what I've been trying to say.
Okay.
That's the form that he filled out for the special event permit covers all sorts of things. And it was set up so people wanting to hold events in parks didn't have to go to Parks and Recreation and then to L&O.
Yeah.
L&O takes care of all of it.
So let's let Matt run through that and see if he can get what he needs. And if he can't, then come back to us and we'll see how we can help, if we can help. And if he gets what he needs, then he's golden. It may be, it's all there. You know, it may all be there. So,
and like I say, I'm more than willing to help on this.
That's stellar. Appreciate it, Susan.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any additional items for consideration? And if not, would somebody like to make a motion for adjournment?
I will make that motion. This is Luke.
Luke, I have a motion from Luke for adjournment. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, David, second. So we have a first and a second. Any discussion on adjournment? Hearing none, all in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting is officially adjourned. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for a fabulous meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.